Do you like movies and games also? Listen, so much more they all know. Pyro, Lotus, and friends, welcome to Corrective Consciousness.
Welcome to Corrective Consciousness, episode 43, the podcast about our lives and love of pop culture. I am your host, Lotus Prince, once again. Vice got double fired this time for his insolence and insubordination. I don't even know how that's supposed to make sense. So
real life fired him.
That is, yeah, pretty much. So, yes. I am Lotus Prince, and this is...
Yeah, this is PyroJackFrost.
And predictably, this is OldManStompy.
Whoa!
The professional understudy of the podcast.
My goodness. So, yeah, of course, yeah, so Vice has some real-life stuff going on, which is why he's not on. I mean, actually, he was fired. And so, instead, we will be going about the podcast without him. Alas, alack. So, Pyro, would you care to kick us...
The show must go on.
Yeah, the show must go on. So, Pyro, would you care to kick us off?
Sure, I'll actually start off running from OldManStompy's understudy mention there, and I went to see a play again. This
Nice.
time it was a more pop culture one than last time, I would say. I saw the Percy Jackson musical. If you're unaware, Percy Jackson is the lightning thief, or he's not the lightning thief, but the book is about a lightning thief. And it's, if you haven't heard, it's this book series by Rick Riordan, I think.
Yep.
Which is a bunch of half-blood kids, let's say they're half god and half human, who go to a camp and find out what god they're half. It's all the Greek mythology, and apparently he has other books on Egyptian, Roman, and Norse mythology as well.
Oh, that I did not know. I was only aware of Percy Jackson and his various books. And regarding Percy himself, it didn't occur to me when I first heard about this. I was like, oh, the kid's name is Percy, okay, but it turns out he's supposed to be like Perseus, like a modern interpretation,
Right.
which would mean that I guess he would be Zeus's son.
Nope.
All right, different
But
canon this
good
time.
So it's actually kind of an important part of the story that I think it's like Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus aren't supposed to have kids. Like they have a pact not to have children anymore.
Boy,
in
is
the
that
novels,
ironic.
because their children always turn out to be like really powerful demigods.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and actually another interesting bit about why his name being Perseus is actually important more towards the theme of the story, I would guess, more so than his lineage, because each of the 5 main books, I guess the starting quintilogy of Percy Jackson books, are all based on a certain Greek hero. The first book is based on Perseus's journey, the original Perseus's journey. So in the book, Percy Jackson fights a Medusa, and he fights a Hydra, and those are all characters that Perseus fought in the classic story. And then the second one is based on the Odyssey. The third one is based on Hercules, I believe. Yeah, and I forget what the last 2 were.
Hercules was the one who fought the Hydra. I was under the impression of, because that was one of his labors.
Oh, was it? Maybe it was, but I know that in the each of the books is supposed to follow somewhat close to the classic Greek heroes. Yeah,
Perseus's thing, I believe, was saving the Princess Andromeda from the Kraken. Like that's like the movie Clash of the Titans, basically.
But I thought the original story didn't have the Kraken. I thought the Kraken was in the movie. Like this is a big deal because Magic the Gathering did a Greek-inspired set.
Oh yeah,
and they tried to be really true to the mythology, and they had a Kraken not because it really ever features in Greek mythology, but because people expect there to be a Kraken because of the name. Like
yeah, Poseidon would have a Kraken. Yeah, I mean, I forgot what the deal was. He said, "Oh no, excuse me." He saved. Well, he definitely killed Medusa. I forgot what was going on with Andromeda. I'm pretty sure she was tied up to be sacrificed to something. If not the Kraken, then some kind of monster. Maybe even the Chimera. Maybe the Chimera was it? In any case, he got the most badass conclusion where he just kills the evil king and every single person in his court by showing them Medusa's head. It's like freaking amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like another cool thing about this musical, I never read the books. I actually am a little bit more interested in reading the books after the play. and I heard that the play is closer to the story than the movie, which is interesting because the play wasn't really that close. But it was still close enough, I felt, from what I've heard, and it was actually a lot funnier than the book was. And it's kind of funny. The other play that I talked about, Anastasia, I mentioned that I really enjoyed the sets and the kind of like the work involved in the sets and all that. And that was really why I enjoyed it. And I have to say that the same thing with the Percy Jackson movie, or musical, but for the opposite reason. So the Anastasia one was an really expensive ticket, and it was like really well done stage props, etc. But the Percy Jackson was a very cheap ticket, relatively, and there were only, let's say, 5 props in the entire movie, and the stage never changed. But it's like what they did with everything, what they did with the little budget they had.
Sure.
That's what made it amazing. And there were only 7 cast members who played all the roles, so that was really cool too.
It's also clever when they're aware that you're aware that they're the same person, but they have like quick change costumes or something, or some creative way of doing multiple roles, which is just entertaining to see how they thought of it.
Yeah, but it was cool, and I have to say the other funny thing about the whole Rick Riordan universe is apparently all of these half god, half humans are in the same world, no matter what mythology they're from.
Oh.
Like the Greek gods all live in New York, while let's say the Norse gods all live in LA or something like that.
Okay. That's kind of interesting.
And that's kind of how these gods never mingle. They've kind of had a truce as to which set of gods controls which part of the US.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I've heard.
It's kind of reminiscent of like the Marvel and DC comic universes, where the superheroes they have like a superhero supervillain ecology that's all centered around single cities, and they don't really mix just because like they all have their own territory.
Yeah, and it kind of helps them not have to have all these heroes, because if there's a villain in this one city, like let's say Spider-Man's city, then it's the reason why there aren't any of the other superheroes helping him out, because like that's his territory.
Right.
Although it is strange though, because like every single Marvel hero is in New York City. It's just that Spider-Man just seems to stick to his own guys, and the Fantastic Four stick to their own guys. Whereas like in DC, like I think there actually is like an official understanding that every other superhero stays out of Gotham because Batman kind of wants to do it right, whereas Superman could probably just solve that problem like overnight if he really wanted to.
Yeah, I don't know, and it's one of those things that I'm willing to suspend disbelief, because if the story is interesting, I don't care the reason why there aren't any other superheroes helping out unless the writing requires it, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, individual stories are kind of really what the point is, especially when the morality tales, as opposed to like, but what about the extended universe? It's like whatever. Like.
So yeah, other than that, I mean, another thing that I've actually started last week is Kamen Rider again. I used to really enjoy watching that when I was in college, and then I stopped.
Wow.
I'm going to talk more about it probably later on this week, but I kind of just wanted to mention that I've been watching that with my girlfriend. We're up to episode 4 of Gaim, which just really, really quickly, and by really quickly I mean like I'm going to say something and then I'm going to move on, this is the fruit-based Kamen Rider.
Oh, this was the Madoka one, right, with the other
Going
worlds?
off from that, I've been another thing I did on this weekend was Free Comic Book Day, which again, it isn't very interesting this year, I would have to say, but I went to that. I went to Midtown Comics in Midtown, obviously, but the one that's in Times Square, and it's really cool because they just give you all the free comics, whereas the one that I went to last year, you had to actually pick which ones you wanted. But that's always a cool thing to do. And then really to close out, what I've been doing is more Final Fantasy XIV and more Persona 5. In terms of Persona 5, I'm moving along. I finished the 4th dungeon. I'm almost at the 5th dungeon, I believe. So I'm about getting halfway, if not halfway already. Yeah.
So what? This 10 or
what?
Or 8 or there's 10 dungeons? 8?
I believe there's 9.
Okay, sounds like
it's actually interesting because like all of the bosses. I think I mentioned this last podcast. All the bosses in the Persona games had some sort of theme, at least 3, 4, and 5. In 3, they were all based on the tarot cards. On 4, they were just based on the shadows of your party members and plus a couple. And then, but in 5, they're all based on the 9 deadly sins.
Cough, cough.
Yeah. They made up 2 more. I don't remember I don't know which 2 they made up, but there's 9 dungeons, and they're each some sort of sin. That
is there like
the
double gluttony?
What?
Is there like double gluttony?
No, I think they made up like 2 new sins.
The actual new sin.
Yeah.
It's kind of reminiscent of like the Terry Pratchett interpretations of like the 4 horsemen, where in the Good Omens, like one of them is pollution on top of pestilence to represent the modern world, and in one of the Discworld novels there's chaos as the 5th horseman.
Time is one of the horsemen, yeah. And then you could say in the Darksiders universe, they mentioned that pestilence, or actually pestilence was a more modern one. It used to just be conquest was the original.
Oh,
form.
You're right. That's right.
So they mentioned that conquest and famine wouldn't have been interesting horsemen, so they changed it to fury and strife.
Huh.
And strife with a Y.
It's really and fury with a Y, I hope. It's really topical since they just announced Darksiders 3, right? And you're playing as Strife, I think.
A fury. You're playing as the girl.
Fury. Well, Strife I thought was also a girl.
No, Strife is the dual-wielding cowboy kind of one.
Well, that doesn't tell me if it's a boy or a girl.
It's a guy. I would have said cowgirl if it was a girl.
Yeah, well, anyway, I do recall people being really interested in playing as that character because you get the pistols, I think, in the first game.
Yeah, actually.
And
sorry, you finish.
Yeah, and just it's not usual to play like a hack and slash beat 'em up with guns as your primary weapon. Usually, it's a secondary weapon, like in Devil May Cry or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the first Darksiders, which, if you are anyone's unaware, you play as War. That's the first one, and it's basically a Zelda. But it was actually a very well done Zelda clone, and I actually kind of enjoyed it more than Zelda in a way. But then I didn't get a chance to play 2 yet, which you play as Death, and it's also no longer kind of a Zelda. It's now more like open world. There's quests, there's loot that drops with like different grades of loot, which kind of sounds annoying. But either way, in 1 and 2, you actually get Strife's guns, and after the first one, I was like, I hope that we get to play as Strife soon. So it figures that he's the last person we'll ever play as.
That was the big like reveal at the end of Darksiders 1 that like War is left. He's like summoned early, right? So the other 3 horsemen don't come to the apocalypse. And then at the very, very end, like he breaks the 7th seal and the other 3 horsemen show up and you're like, oh my god. In the sequel, we'll get all 4 horsemen. But no, the second game takes place simultaneously with the first game, or like in between like a time skip in the first game and you play as Death.
Yeah, and it's also kind of funny because if you get Strife's guns in 1 and 2, like, what kind, like, does he just throw his guns everywhere and he's like, hey, you can pick them up and use them? Like, I don't need them.
They are where they need to be. They're like, I don't know, they're like a sorting hat.
So you play as Fury in 3, and she wears like a whip. She has like a whip sword, I think. And she's more of a magician kind of character as far as I've heard and read about, but that's all as far as I know.
I mean, the game was only just announced like last week, so
yeah, and it was
not too much.
I wouldn't say it was announced because it was kind of leaked by Amazon.
Yeah. Right. Well, it was concurrently. It was immediately announced after that, and we got the first gameplay reveal to IGN. So they were obviously ready for it.
So maybe the Amazon leak was on purpose, for all we know.
I mean, I think people know, and this has happened to enough companies, where if you put something and ask it to be listed on Amazon, eventually it will get out, just because Amazon is such a large company, and like they're not in the business of preserving, like business intelligence secrets. That you should anticipate once something is listed on Amazon, someone will spoil it.
But yeah, so I'm back to the original topic. I'm trudging through Persona 5, and that probably won't be done anytime soon, so plan on hearing me say this every single time I'm on.
Yes.
So with that being said, OldManStompy, why don't you let us know what your week was like?
So it would be more like 2 weeks, right? Because
2 weeks.
I wasn't on last week's. So immediately the week and after the last time I was on the podcast, the one I wasn't on, and I'm glad I wasn't on it because I got to watch the most recent WWF pay-per-view, So the Wrestling Minute for this week will be about WWE Payback, which was the event they had last Sunday. So the last time I was on, I talked about how there was this like extended beating of the main hero Roman Reigns by this guy Braun Strowman that ended with him like tipping an ambulance over, like coming back and beating up Roman Reigns like 3 consecutive times. And like that's still a gimmick right now backstage. They had a match at Payback. It was the main event of the pay-per-view, and Strowman kicked the crap out of Roman Reigns. He beat him up pretty badly because Reigns was still injured from the last set of beatings and the ambulance being tipped over on top of him. So he lost the match. And then in a vignette they taped only for YouTube, like they showed Roman Reigns like coughing up blood being held into the ambulance, and you could hear like in the distance like, "I'm not finished with you yet." And Strowman comes like charging at him, but this time Reigns knows it's gonna happen, so he like ducks out of the way, and Strowman like rams into the back door of the ambulance and then like goes flying past it into like a pile of boxes. So it was pretty funny. I know I posted it to our private group, but I'm not sure if anybody saw it. It looks absolutely hilarious if you don't expect this like giant 400-pound guy to come running in from the side and then like faceplant directly into a pile of garbage. It's like actually pretty funny. The other big event of note from that pay-per-view, what they called a House of Horrors match. So if you've seen things like the Dungeon of Doom, you know that when the WWF does pre-taped vignettes that are about things other than wrestling or something other than a backstage interview, they often come across as pretty cringe. So the fact that they're planning on taping a House of Horror themed match, like, everything is on the table. It could be the greatest thing they've done in years because they don't really do like taped segments anymore. Almost everything is live in the ring. Or it could just be the worst thing that I've seen in years. And the real answer turned out to be somewhere in the middle. So this started at WrestleMania, where Randy Orton of RKO fame was fighting Bray Wyatt, whose character is like he's like a cult leader. And there were these like weird theatrics during the match where Wyatt would like do a little dance in the ring, and like something would be projected onto the ring itself. Like it would be like a picture of maggots or like worms. I think once it was ants. And it's like he's trying to use psychological warfare and magic against Randy Orton to get a leverage in the match. And, like, nothing ever really happened. Like, it didn't seem to faze Orton at all. And he just delivered his finishing move. Like, they could have done something with it because, like, WrestleMania had a really elaborate stage. And Orton, like, his personality is that he's the Viper. That's his epithet. So he walked down the ramp, like, with the snake, like he was riding the snake down the ramp to the ring. And, like, it probably sounded really cool, but the snake was, like, foreshortened because it was coming out of the ramp. So it looked like he was kind of riding a giant sperm, like all the way down the ring.
Well then.
So they could have had Orton do his little Viper pose, and then like something projects onto the ring of like a snake eating the worms or something, and they could have played into the storyline where like Orton beat Wyatt at his own game, but they didn't do that. They just had Orton deliver his finisher as though Bray Wyatt was just an idiot who couldn't do anything except make stupid pictures show up on the ring. Like if you're gonna have a guy who seems to be able to do magic, like, at the very least, you should show it having some impact on the guy he's trying to use it against, or else he just looks like an idiot. Like, that's part of the problem with a character of that type. It doesn't really sell well.
It doesn't help that WWE kind of... I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but it's kind of low budget, so it's not like they have tons of props or, like, special effects they can do during a match for the magic. Like, the other guy would have to sell it.
I don't want to say they're low budget. Like, the stage for WrestleMania costs $5 million. You can't tell me they can't make, expensive props if they really wanted to. They just don't want to, and it's hard to do in a live environment. Like,
yes,
because you have to, like, the audience, you have to know your entire audience is willing to sell their disbelief of whatever you're going to show. Mm-hmm. So, you can imagine, like, it didn't work when they did it in a live match, so they would probably have more flexibility if they were doing a pre-taped segment. But at the same time, it really kills the crowd because they're not watching anything on the ring. They're just watching something on the screen projector they have at the top of the ramp. So it's still a really hard thing to do that only matters to the audience who's watching on pay-per-view or on their online streaming service. So, like, the start of it, like, Orton just drives up to this House of Horrors, quote unquote. Like, why would he even go there? He has no reason to do it. Like, he's not contracted to do it. Is he going there to prove a point? Is he going there like intentionally to show that he can beat Wyatt at his own game because it didn't matter the first time? So he drives up in a limousine to this mansion with like weird blue lights in all the rooms, and he walks in, and apparently this mansion was like some really rundown house in a bad part of some town close to San Jose where the pay-per-view is being taped. It was selling for like $30,000, which is not cheap, which is not expensive for a house in that part of America. It's really cheap. And he walks into the first room, and it's furnished, and it looks like just like someone's apartment that has like spider webs, Halloween spider webs all over it. It was not scary at all.
That's the best.
So like they fight for a while. Like Wyatt keeps popping out of all the doors. You know, sometimes he punches through a window and tries to strangle Orton. Like he tries all the House of Horror tricks. There's a room that has like decapitated baby dolls in it. There's a room that has like a little satanic symbol in it, and it ends in the kitchen, which is like the creepiest and dirtiest looking part of the house. So like that part was actually a little bit effective. Like Wyatt actually looked like someone who was out to beat the crap out of Randy Orton. He was taking all the pots and pans, just banging him with it, and he wound up like tipping a refrigerator over onto him. And then he leaves, and he steals Orton's limousine, and he asks the driver, who apparently doesn't ask any questions, as the guy who like just drives the limousine back to San Jose. Which, by the way, you know, this thing was taped in the middle of the night, and in San Jose it was like 6 o'clock in the evening in, you know, California, so it was broad daylight while this was going on. So it didn't make any... So obviously whatever was going on, it must have taken place at least like 18 hours prior to the taping of the segment.
It's pretty good.
So he drives in Randy Orton's limousine, shows up at the arena, and they say this match has to end in the middle of the ring no matter what, but it can end by forfeiture. So Wyatt, like, he comes in, his entrance is actually really good. The crowd is really into it. He comes down, the whole arena is dark, and he's carrying a lantern that like has a fog machine attached to it, so it looks pretty cool. And the audience will put up their cell phones, so it looks like starlight all around the arena.
Huh.
And this is just a thing the audience has made a part of his character. They call them the Fireflies. Like that's the in-universe term for it. Yeah. So, like, his entrance is actually really impressive. So when the lights come on, like, Randy Orton is right behind him. Like, no one knows how he got from this house in San Jose. Like, he must have called an Uber or something.
Nice.
Or since we know the thing must have taken place last night, he had all the time in the world to get back from wherever this house is all the way to the arena.
Just walked.
But, like, at the time, I thought it was dumb, right? Because it makes it seem like Orton is the horror monster. You know, like, Wyatt is the hero returning from the final skirmish. And, you know, the lights go out and they turn back on, and then Orton's standing right behind him, which is like how a lot of thriller movies end, you know, or how the final clash takes place. But I guess, like, to me, that actually seems like they closed the circle and did what I wanted them to do at WrestleMania, where it showed Orton beat Wyatt at his own game by becoming the monster and proving that he was better at this horror crap than Wyatt was. And he actually lost the match because of interference, but that wasn't the important part. That wasn't the theatrics.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the pay-per-view. Besides that, I've been playing Binding of Isaac a lot, which, you know, we can't have an episode of this without talking about somebody playing Binding of Isaac.
For sure.
So what really frustrated me and what allowed Lotus to get so far ahead of me in terms of the achievement hunting is that there's one achievement where it doesn't really matter, like, how much you play the game. It's time-gated. Well, there's two, but I have one of them already. There's an achievement for playing the daily challenge every day.
Yeah.
Well, not every day, but for 31 days. And there's one for winning. There's one for winning the daily challenge every day, 5 days in a row.
Yeah, that's the one I hate.
And Lotus and I were neck and neck on that for a long time until there was one day we were both 1 day away from getting it, and I died that day, and Lotus won. So he got the achievement, and I had to start all over again. So I just put the game down, and I stopped playing it for a really long time, because, like, now I have to start all over again. And so I put the game down for a couple of weeks. I kind of forgot how to play. Like, I forgot how to be good at it. And so I would play once, and I would die, and I would get frustrated, and not want to play the game for another week. So, like, in terms of hours played, like, right now I'm not between jobs. I'm in the hiring process for my next job. So I'm not employed, but I will be employed, so I have a lot of free time. And if I had gotten this achievement, I definitely would have just ground out everything that I had left over and, like, platinum the game already. But, like, I just have to keep starting the stupid chain of 5 over every time I die, and it's really aggravating. So, like, I have been playing that a little bit. I beat Ultra Greedier as the Lost, so I got one of the hard ones out of the way.
Nice.
You know, pretty early on. As I call it, I got you know, most of my winning runs with the Keeper and the challenge characters somehow involve, like, Tech X, which is one of the most powerful upgrades in the game. Dead Cat, which is the one that lets you die 9 times in a run.
Yeah, if you're the Lost or the Keeper, that's freaking legendary.
Yeah, that's the trade-off. You can die 9 times in a run, but you always start with 1 heart.
Yeah, so with the Lost, who could only ever get hit once, it's just 9 more chances. So I was like, yes.
So yeah, it's a those two items, Tech X, which is probably the most powerful offensive item in the game, and Dead Cat, which gives you a lot of leeway to not have to worry about screwing up with a character that can only take 1 or 2 hits. Those factor into the majority of my winning runs for those characters, so I just kept grinding until... Like, I feel kind of bad, because I don't think I've ever actually won a run where I didn't have at least one of those 2 items, and it kind of makes me feel like I'm not actually achieving anything. I'm like, reloading my game over and over again until I get one of those 2, but, like, there's so many ways to break Binding of Isaac that I guess I don't...
That's your way.
I can't lose too much sleep over it. Other than that, I did beat Trails of Cold Steel.
Yay!
I was pretty close to finishing it. The last battle is really annoying. It's completely different than every other battle in the entire game. And you basically have to play it. It's kind of like rock, paper, scissors. Like, it's like if you've ever played Suikoden the Duels, where you have to read what move to pick on based on what the... Like, in Suikoden, which is PS2 era RPG series, PS1, PS2 era RPG series, there's a duel system in the game where your opponent will say something that indicates what they're going to do, and you have to counterpick your action in the duel based on what they say. And if you know what their actions interpret to, what actions their quotes interpret to, then you can basically win every fight in the game trivially. But if you don't know, it's actually kind of a struggle. The final boss of Trails of Cold Steel is like that, except you kind of have to do it perfectly, because your character is so fragile that if you don't play perfectly, you'll just run out of the ability to heal and you'll die. So if I hadn't looked up the correct selections in a guide, I probably would have been really frustrated, because the fight before that is sort of the real final boss fight, quote unquote, using the regular combat system. It takes like an hour to fight. It was incredibly long. I don't know if I could have done it faster if I understood the combat system better. But to go through that and then to try to finish the game and have to grind through the stupid RPS fight, I probably would have been really frustrated.
When I played the original Legend of Heroes, not the original, but the Trails in the Sky, 1 and 2, it's like I always felt like I understood the battle system, but then like every single boss fight, I'm like, I don't know anything. Right.
I know. I know how I feel, because I just went back to Trails in the Sky second. Now that I finished Cold Steel, that's what's on my Vita. And it's hard. Like I mentioned the last time, you start as though the game assumes that you played through all of first chapter, which I did, but like years ago, before you start second chapter, because you start with literally the same character that you finished first chapter with, at the same level as though you were in the mid game.
Yep.
And you start from there. I've heard Cold Steel 2, you don't start exactly the same way, but it's similar, where the difficulty is pretty hard if you don't remember what playing Cold Steel 1 was like. Beyond that, the only other thing of note I did last week was yesterday. Yesterday, my wife went to a bridal shower party that was thrown for Pyro's girlfriend's sister.
Yes.
And I knew I would have the whole day to myself. And I kind of
isn't that an amazing feeling?
Oh, well, I mean, like, I want to tell this story, and I want to say that, like, I am perfectly happily married, and I would never choose the bachelor's life over the married life. But, like, I spent so much time thinking about what I was going to do to enjoy myself during this day with, like, no additional input that I didn't want to have any of it taken away from me, you know? And it's like, on the second day, I probably would have gotten pretty lonely, you know, if she had stayed over or something. But, like, this first day, like, for me, all I wanted to do was, what I wound up doing was I went to Dave & Buster's at 10 o'clock in the morning. For those of you who don't live in a state with Dave & Buster's or don't live in America at all, it's like a sports bar that has an arcade attached to it, and it's the other chain besides Round 1 that has the new Dance Dance Revolution in the U.S. So my plan was to go at 10 o'clock when hopefully there would be nobody there and just play DDR, and then depending upon how tired I got and how sweaty I got and how much I felt like being outside, not asleep, you know, I'd plan the rest of my day around that. And that's how it was. I went, there was absolutely nobody there. I felt really creepy going to it. It was basically a sports bar at 10 o'clock in the morning to play video games because nobody would be there. It's like the peak antisocial behavior, to go to an extremely public place and hope that nobody would be there. So like my wife kept asking me, she kept sending me text messages like Keith, are you bored? I was like, no. I was like, do you want me to call somebody and go hang out? No. And I heard at one point she actually went and asked you, Pyro, like if you wanted to go hang out with me because you were also in the same position, just hanging out by yourself, like staying away from the party.
it's like that morning I was helping get the party together. Like I had to go run and buy some stuff. When I got back, I had to help blow up balloons, put up decorations, prepare some food. And your wife was there, and she asked, like, oh, can Keith come over? And, like, you guys can keep each other company. I'm like, no, that's okay with me. I'm perfectly fine with staying upstairs and playing Persona 5 all day. And, like, several times she asked me, like, oh, do you want to hang out with Keith? And I'm like, no, I'm fine. And I agree that if this was 2 days, I would have probably gotten bored. But
yeah,
it's nice every now and then having a day where I don't have anything to do.
Yeah, it's like being a responsible adult is its own reward, but having a day where you have an excuse to be irresponsible,
yep,
is a load off your mind, I think. So yeah, that was my day, and since that was yesterday, that basically concludes my 2-week period. So I'd be happy to hear how Lotus spent his week, except for the fact that he platinumed Binding of Isaac before me. Fucking piece of it. I mean, congratulations.
I was actually gonna say my week had nothing to do with bridal parties or anything of that sort. So yeah, I don't know.
So it's very much uninteresting then, is what you're saying.
Yeah, no texts about me hanging out with either of you guys, I'm afraid. I was left there.
Yeah, so we call that bridal party. Lotus Prince calls that every day.
Irresponsible. Like, papers degrade? Okay, fine. After that, like, slothful bullshit that people probably look down on.
Do you even do Let's Plays anymore, Lotus Prince?
Actually, it has been a couple months, actually. But
that's a shout out to the guy who asked that on the last episode of Corrective Consciousness.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's like, I should know. I know you do, because I just did one with you like a few weeks ago.
No, I know. I've actually been recording a bunch like simultaneously, but I haven't uploaded a single friggin' one of them. So it's like they're mine. They're all mine. Only I may watch.
Only you may bask in your own glory.
Yeah, you guys can come over to my place and watch if you'd like, but it's never going online because I'm suddenly really eccentric.
Maybe you can start a Kickstarter where people just have to pay to come to your place and watch your Let's Plays.
That's such a dick move. And by the way, I'm not covering your travel either. Actually, Rule of Rose is going up really soon. So people will be happy to see that, I think, even though the game itself is miserable and people will soon not be happy. But as for what I've actually been doing this week, yeah, I platinumed Isaac on Wednesday. I was super hyped because I had mentioned the last podcast that I'd done all of the challenges, like the actual tasks. So the only thing I had left to do was clean up items. So I had 6 items that I needed to find. One of them was Dad's old coin. This is something that's easily attainable from early boss fights, or as it turns out, I found out later in the greed shop. But I just happened across it really quickly. It's a surprisingly lame item for a boss item. Basically what it is you can pick up currency in the game. There's pennies, nickels, and dimes. With pennies, they're of course more plentiful. And every once in a while, it's a little rare, but when you pick up a penny, your luck stat might go up, implying that that was a lucky penny. So Dad's old coin, when you pick it up, it disappears and it drops a single penny on the ground, which is guaranteed to be a lucky penny. And it's like, thanks. I'm glad I beat a boss for this. So
that's kind of normal too, though. Sometimes there is like the foot that's just like luck up +1.
Yeah.
So you can think of it just as 1 coin plus luck +1.
Pretty much. Yeah. It's like, all right, great. So another item I had to get was the dull razor. This is something that's shop only. So I just went to greed mode and kept resetting until it was just the first thing in the shop. Then I raised 15 coins and bought it. So the dull razor is an interesting item. There's an item just called the razor, and its function is to hurt you for 1 red heart's worth of damage. And I specify red heart because if you ever pick up blue or black hearts, they're extras, and if you get hurt, then they're the first to go. But the razor will cut directly into your red hearts, leaving whatever blue and black are left behind, which is
very thematic.
Yeah. No, it's great because there are some Colosseum fight doors that only open if you're at 1 red heart, and there's a power-up in the game that really boosts you for your attack and speed if you are at 1 red heart. So that the character Eve starts with that power-up and the razor, so you can just power yourself up immediately if you want. So that's the razor. The dull razor doesn't do any of that. It's really interesting. It's like if you were to hit yourself with a dull razor, it hurts you, but it doesn't actually cause bodily harm. So the dull razor requires charges to use. You can only use it once every 2 rooms, but what it does is it just puts you into the hurt state where you go, ow, and you blink for a few seconds, so it gives you the temporary invincibility of being damaged without actually damaging you. So it's good if you're ever really in a pinch and need to escape from being cornered or something. It's a very specific use item, but okay. Like, it wouldn't be my item of choice, but if I have it, then I'll use it.
Well, it's important because there are also things that trigger on being damaged, like the stopwatch.
Does it actually work with those?
Yeah, that's really the point of the dull razor. The point is not to give you mercy and invulnerability, it's to trigger things that happen when you get hurt.
Okay,
for the most part,
all right,
without
fair
actually
enough.
taking damage.
Okay, so I guess like the razor, it has its particular combinations that make it useful. I also needed the Eye of Belial. I don't even know what that does. I was just going through... This is an item that only appears in the Devil Room. Once you beat some bosses, a Devil Room might show up, and you can pay life for it. So I just played with Isaac, who has the 6-sided die, which gives you the ability to re-roll power-ups. So I went into the Devil Room, and if it was there, I'd buy it. If it wasn't, I'd use the 6-sided die and hope it came up then. And, I bought that item. Another one I needed was called Duality. It's the one item in the game I'm aware of that is available in both Devil and Angel Rooms. For Angel Rooms, it costs nothing. For Devil Room, it costs life to get. But what it does is it allows you, if a Devil or an Angel Room would ever spawn when you beat a boss, both will spawn, and you may choose one to go into. So that's actually kind of nice. If you would get a supernatural room, you are guaranteed to get the one that you would have preferred. So that's kind of useful. The last 2 items I needed were such a royal pain to get, because one of them was Angel Room only. And it's kind of rare for you to get items in the Angel Room at all. Usually they give you coins or heart power-ups. So finding an item, let alone this one, is just a pain. It's called the Glyph of Equality. And this thing, I had mentioned in previous podcasts that some enemies have champion forms, which means they're bigger, different colored, and usually take more hits to kill. And they usually drop a particular item or power-up of some kind when you kill them. The Glyph of Equality affects what they drop based on what you need. So if you're really low on health, they might be more likely to drop a heart, for example. So there are many different effects for this. I don't know what they all are, but it's stuff like that. And the final item, I needed a guide to even find out what it was, because this one...
Is this the tonsil?
Yeah, it's such a pain in the ass. So basically, there are power-ups you could pick up from item rooms that take up your one active power-up slot. There are also lower-level items like that called trinkets that take up your trinket slot. You only are allowed to hold one trinket unless you hold a particular power-up whose sole purpose is to give you the ability to hold 2. But you can only hold one trinket at a time, and they either give you a passive ability or they activate their one-time use ability. Well, not necessarily one time, but they activate their ability if you get hit enough. For example, one trinket is called Mom's Bag Lunch, and it does absolutely nothing. But if you're hit enough, then it's like it jostles the bag and the food comes out, so it gives you a health boost. Like a maximum health boost. So the tonsil item also does nothing, and if you get hit enough, then it spawns a familiar that floats around you and shoots alongside you, and that counts as the item. Like, I would not have ever figured that out.
You know what's good with that?
It can keep going. It can keep producing. I think
the dull razor.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah. So with this one, for the life of me, I could not find the tonsil item. Like, I actually had found it in previous natural runs, but I didn't know what it was, so I was like, yeah, whatever. And now when I'm looking for it, I have no idea where to get it. Like, I was like, can I buy it from the trinket section of the greed shop? And just... I don't know if it comes up or not. I saw a couple forum posts that said maybe it does, but I just never got it. So I tried a different strategy, where someone said, well, I'll just buy Mom's Box, whose sole purpose is it's charge-based, and when it's fully charged and you use it, it pops out a random trinket. So hope you get the tonsil. So I was grinding for trinkets or that in the greed shop, and if I ever saw one of those was for sale, then I'd be like, okay, and I'd go out and take the regular items power-up, like the regular power-up room. I would take that item and, try to grind my way through a bunch of enemies to get 15 coins. As it happened, the way I got the tonsil was from neither of those strategies. In the regular power-up room, there's an item called, like, the belly button, or the belly button lint or whatever, and it's like Mom's box, except it's a one-use thing. When you pick it up, it immediately disappears and gives you a random trinket. And it was the tonsil, so I was like, yes. So I had to basically get as much health power-ups as I could, or as many, and then try to get hit all the time until I felt, okay, I might die if I'm hit some more, so I better stop. And eventually I was able to get it, so that got me the platinum. Although the real slap in the face, though, is when you do that, if you look at your save file, your save file's picture changes based on achievements you've gotten in the game, like, and I mean accomplishments, not like achievements. So, like, when you beat Mom for the first time, you have this picture of Isaac standing triumphantly over Mom when she's been taken down, stuff like that. So if you platinum the game, there's a picture of Isaac just kind of sitting there, and there are words on your save file icon that says, only 2 more save files to go, and I'm like, nope, not doing that. You don't get anything.
Do you have to platinum both the other save files?
Yes. It's just for personal satisfaction, though. There's no achievement tied to it, but it's just like, nope. If you do get all 3 pictures, then, like, the achievement is called 1,001%. If you get all 3 pictures, then it's like a larger picture going across all 3, which has, like, 300 on picture 1, 3 more zeros on picture 2, and then, like, the last 0 and a percent on the last picture. It's like 3,000,001%, yay. I'm not doing that. I'm done.
But then we could talk about Binding of Isaac for another 986 hours.
I was gonna say slightly under 1,000 more hours. Let's do it.
Also, that means that Lotus Prince did not actually master the game.
The hell with that. I didn't master the game 3 times.
Have you watched him play? He's got a platinum and he still hasn't mastered the game.
That's what people said about my Demon Souls Let's Play, actually. They're like...
That's what everybody who's ever seen you who've ever seen you play video games has said about that game that you're playing at the time.
Oh, yeah. But you didn't really master it. Whatever, man. I got a platinum. Go away. So I did Isaac. And, speaking of, recording Let's Plays and just not uploading them, I actually had... Mr. Ryu over recently, and we took a look at a new game for once. I know, I can do those too. It's called Little Nightmares. Ever heard of that one?
Yes, just now. When you said that.
Whoa. It's really interesting. This is, it's like, there are a lot of games I like, and there are a lot of horror games I find interesting. Little Nightmares is one of a few that's just, it just really hits my aesthetic sense, just immediately. Like, okay, you know the movie A Nightmare Before Christmas? Now, you know how there are all these weird stop-motion clay-looking figures? Do you remember, like, the little fat boy? Like,
yes.
Yes.
Like, picture a video game with bad guys that are kind of designed like him, and it's creepy as hell. So it's called Little Nightmares, but it looks and plays like Limbo and Inside, even though it's actually made by a different company. We actually looked that up between installments. Like, is this their 3rd game? No, it isn't. It's just very similar. The game just kind of starts. Here you are, navigate this place, and you're like, okay. And you're going through all sorts of kind of creepy rooms where everything is oversized, or perhaps you are undersized, because you're in a world of giants, but they're also creepy, like, scary stories to tell in the dark-looking giants, where it's like, ugh, like, the proportions are all freakish, and no thank you. And it takes a while before you even see the first one. But when you do, it's like, oh, this is what the game's gonna be, huh? Like, so the first giant you see, I'm not gonna go into too much detail here, because everyone looks different, and we've only beaten, like, 3 levels, but the first proper giant antagonist you see, these people all seem to have a thing for, like, capturing and possibly eating children, and it's just like, you find all these little cages with kids in them, some alive, some not. There are wrapped, like, bodies, like, piles and piles of them, and, like, what happened to them? I don't know. Don't want to find out either. But the first giant antagonist you see is, like, for a giant, he actually looks kind of small. He has very kind of, like, condensed features. Like, he's kind of, like, scrunched. Like, he has stubby legs, and he's got, like, a big head, but not very far off his body, But he's got a really wide mouth and too many little tiny sharp teeth. But his arms are freakishly long. Like, they are creepy. They're like Freddy Krueger from the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie long. Like, it's just like, ew. So, like, there are rooms where it's really basically a puzzle-based game, but you gotta, like, avoid these creatures and get out from the other side. But there are things where if he's aware of you, he'll chase you slowly, and you gotta run away from him as he grabs for you. But then you're climbing all these bookshelves and getting to the top of the room, and he could still easily reach you, and the only reason he doesn't is because he's blind, so you have to hope he reaches in wrong places. It's so unsettling. His hands could just go anywhere, and you're like, nope. So it provides a really interesting aesthetic. The last thing I'll say before I move on is that the game's rated T for teen. It never gets grotesque or anything. It's all about implication, where, like, if a giant ever catches you, usually he just kind of stands there holding you, and you're like, well, I think I know where this goes, and it just fades out. Like, you don't get any horrible fates or anything, but again, the aesthetic and the general gameplay are really intimidating. So this is the kind of game that, ironically, despite being called Little Nightmares, I don't think this is the kind of game that would keep you awake at night, but it's freaky when you're playing it. So it's a very interesting game, and I definitely want to see where it goes. It's one of those minimalistic games. Again, like Limbo or Inside, where there's no narrative, but you could tell how the world works as you go through it. So I'm excited. So I'll see when I can put that one up as well. So that's effectively been my week, other than just dealing with end of semester stuff. That's coming on Wednesday and one or two more Saturday classes, but I mentioned that last week. So with that covered, I guess it's time for Vice's weigh in. I have no freaking clue what his progress is, so at this point
So
it's time for
let's
questions. Okay, so we have a question from Sabrina Hengel. So just plain, she's kind of got a two-parter. One of them is just, it's not really a question, it's just plain discuss music and how they influence their mediums. Like, how can music do that?
I mean, in every single way.
Yeah. I mean, actually, even with Little Nightmares and Limbo and Inside, musical cues can indicate when the threat's coming or when you've completed something. The sound design in those
Or
games
tell you if you're
takes over
supposed to be
for the
happy or
narrative.
sad.
Yeah. I think, wasn't Star Wars, I don't know if it was A New Hope, maybe it was as late as Return of the Jedi, but wasn't the original Star Wars trilogy like the first movie or set of movies to have not just situation themes but particular character themes?
I have no idea.
Like the Princess Leia theme, you could tell it's hers because it happens whenever she shows up on screen. Was that the first to do that? I heard it might have been. But yeah, I mean, music can really tell a story in its own way. Regarding the actual question coming from this, though, is there a song or a music piece, so, not necessarily lyrical, you still remember fondly, or that has left a deep impression on you to this day? For me, for Sabrina Hengel, one of those is Moonlit Night from the anime Death Parade. I've heard the song before and it strongly resonated with me, and after watching the anime, I was so drawn to it that I decided to learn on the piano, and now I can play it by heart. So do you have any, music like that that's affected you in such a way?
Me personally, not really. That's my quick answer. I mean, I've always, I guess the way I'll answer this is that I've always been drawn to electronic music and video game music from that, because it's trying to convey emotion without any words.
Yeah. And,
I mean, most electronic music I like just because I like the beats. Like, I just like drumming along to songs and, bobbing my head and whatever, making myself look like a fool on the train. But more like video game music, they really have to convey emotions, because there is text going on the screen during certain scenes, but just like movie music, when there's no words, it really helps convey what's going on. And there have been really sad moments in movies that have felt so much sadder just because of the music that was playing.
And actually, this is going, just real quick, this is going back to discussing music in general, but also sometimes the lack thereof can be particularly impactful.
Right. So, regarding the first part of the question, in this podcast, several times we've discussed, games like Undertale, where the music itself gives you sort of narrative clues. And it also, like, for example, there's a character, one of the early boss fights, where the music picks up like the theme stays the same, but the music picks up a heavier bass beat, indicating the fight actually got serious, as opposed to you believing the character to be kind of a goofball in your interactions with them up to that point. Like, the fight is really trivial until all of a sudden it gets hard, and at that point the music changes significantly. Another example would be, I mean, one of Vice's favorite games is Rez. And that also uses electronic music pretty heavily. Like, electronic music is a lot like classical music in certain ways, in that it relies on the repetition of themes and the evolution of those themes over the course of a long piece to tell a story or to evoke a specific feeling. And that's kind of like how shooter levels are, or a lot of video game levels are. They're based on teaching you a mechanic through repetition, and then evolving that mechanic to, you know, produce increasingly challenging and, you know, stimulating situations. So, like, the music they used in Rez really fit what they were trying to do in the gameplay. It was a pretty compelling merging, you know, of the soundtrack with the action on the screen, plus the synesthesia on top of that. I think that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Regarding a piece that really meant a lot to me, I'm gonna go a little obscure here, and not talk about video games or wrestling. And I'm going to go with an anime I watched a really long time ago called Kaiba, not related to the Yu-Gi-Oh character whatsoever. It's a story about... it starts out as an ontological story. There's a character who basically wakes up and has no idea where he is, has no memories, meets another character and finds himself sort of like dropped in the middle of what looks like a major conflict. And he has to figure out who he is, as well as like what side he should take in that conflict. And we learn about the world along with the main character. But the conceit of the story is that everybody's basically an android, and they have like a little chip in their heads that contains all their memories. So there's two different kinds of weapons, one of which is a weapon that like erases your data chip but keeps your body intact, and the other one is a weapon that like disintegrates your body but keeps your memories intact. And there's some interesting interplay, you know, between the severity of the two different kinds of weapons used in this war that's going on over the course of the series. And there's an episode where there's a character who lives in poverty. She works in a mine, and she's got 3 kids, one of which was adopted after her sister passed away. It's the daughter of the sister. And we see that she's like taking some kind of drug to like delete her memories. And we find out later that she was doing that because she was deleting all the happy memories of the sister and the daughter, because she couldn't afford to maintain all the mouths, and she wanted to sell the daughter's physical body and keep the chip, so that she only had 2 mouths to feed. And she was doing this to herself to delete her own memories so she wouldn't feel bad about it anymore. And at the end of the series, she starts playing the piano, and it's like the drug that she's taking wears off while she's doing it, and it plays this track that builds as she remembers more and more of her past, and she remembers the past with her sister. She remembers the happy times with the daughter, and at this point, it's already too late. You know, her daughter's already gone. You know, but like the impact of what she's given up, you know, for herself, like hits her, and the track builds until all of a sudden she can't take it anymore and just like slams her hands down on the piano. I listened to that track, like that scene, you know, 9 or 10 times after I watched it for the first time, because I thought it was really great. I wanted to make it in the groove, a DDR step file to it.
Oh,
It
cool.
meant a lot to me. Yeah. I never actually did, because it was hard to get a clean rip of it that I could upload to the... Yeah. Lame. Excuse me. Sorry. So anyway, that was I recommend the anime in general, although it's somewhat esoteric. So like I can't really tell you if I felt like rewarded by the narrative conclusion at the end of it, but I certainly thought it was interesting. Very surrealist. Otherwise, that would be my answer to the second part of the question.
For me, like, I mean, there are various songs or pieces of music that I still remember fondly, but like, I don't know if there's one particular thing like, oh man, this is the one that changed my life or anything like that. I mean, I could definitely think of ones that I really like. I tend to like Pyro, listen to a lot of electronic and video game music, and usually stuff with a pretty fast beat. You know, it makes it fun to drive in the car with and just, you know, get into the jam and all that good stuff. But for the slower, more emotional songs or pieces of music, I found that for straight classical music, I found that I really enjoy Clair de Lune. That is just a slow, absolutely beautiful piece of music that somehow can be played by one person on a piano. It sounds like it's more than it is. Like, it really...
Fun. fun fact, there is a store in Persona 2 that has that music that's called the Clair de Lune.
Yeah,
Nice.
and also Clair de Lune plays in the save areas of the Evil Within. I'm assuming the Persona store... Well, based on what you're doing in Persona, the whole game is effectively dreams and unconscious state, and that's what the Clair de Lune is supposed to represent. So...
Well, yeah, but I mean, this store is in their version of the real world. But I understand the connection and why they have a store
It's like a little wink, you know, like Dvorak's... Dvorak's symphony that I forgot what it's called. I think it's just like a number, like number 6, but you know that dun dun na 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 na, like that one. I heard it both in Asura's Wrath and in Killer is Dead when you're fighting on the moon. I'm like, what a coincidence, and it's not a coincidence. You know, it was this. I think presumably the track that played, like Neil Armstrong brought the record up with him when he was landing on the actual moon. But as for a song with lyrics that really impacted me, this is another one, like a real slow one. If you ever want to get into like a real like kind of emotional state, it's something that you kind of want to dedicate your concentration to and not really play in the background. But even though it's one of the weaker Silent Hill games to me, as far as the original ones were concerned, it's from Silent Hill 4. But it's the track that plays when a particular character dies at a particular point in the game. I'm not going to spoil stuff, but it's called Room of Angel, and the game itself doesn't play the whole thing because the song's like 7 minutes long. It's one of those things, if you want to hear the whole thing, then look up the OST or look up on YouTube. But it is just like, it's super sad. It's really impactful. It's got this, like, the way the lyrics and the music go together, it provides a really good combination of just slow waves, I guess, of emotion. Really good.
If I want to end this on a silly beat, no pun intended. One song that I used to say I felt really impactful was a Linkin Park song. I forget which one it was, but I remember I was listening to it one day and I turned to my dad and I'm like, this song is just like me. Like, why do you always make me feel this way? And he's like, and basically, without these words, but by the reaction, he's like, are you fucking stupid?
Yeah.
Like,
that's
grow
pretty
up.
funny. Yeah, Linkin Park, like,
So-
nobody understands me, man.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to Johnny Cash's version of Hurt, which also played in the Logan trailer, original movie trailer. Like ever since the passing of Dan LaFontaine, like, movie trailers have evolved to become like little 2-minute mini films where the thesis of the film is to make you want to watch the movie. And they can't use the movie's soundtrack really because they're saving it for the film, or possibly sometimes it hasn't even been, fully mastered yet. So like the choice of music that's designed to give you a certain association with the movie you're about to watch, like, to me that's really interesting. I know they've used that in the same song in Rick and Morty. They used it in the Prototype 2 trailer, which is kind of a weird place to have it. I think they used the original Nine Inch Nails version in Rick and Morty. But that's an interesting song if you want to know that you're going to go into a movie feeling really emotional.
Actually, speaking of which, if you want to talk about songs used for trailers that really impacted me, I remember the trailer for Watchmen had Smashing Pumpkins. They have 2 songs and they're very similarly titled. The End is the Beginning is the End, and The Beginning is the End is the Beginning. I think it was The End is the Beginning is the End, but like the really sad slow one. Like the songs intentionally sound similar, but there's a different attitude about each of them. That one was really solid. I also liked, this is going way back, but it was the trailer for Gears of War, I want to say 2. Like All Around Me, Familiar Face, like that one. The way it worked with the video, I think, is what did it. Because the song is almost like cliche at this point, but the way it was used was super effective. I highly recommend you look up, I forgot which Gears of War game it is, but just go to YouTube and look up Gears of War, Familiar Faces, and like, you'll see it immediately.
I can think of the Dead Island trailer. Yeah. Remember that? Like, that had like the greatest trailer. Like, the soundtrack was definitely part of it, and then it had like nothing to do with the video game.
I know.
Whatsoever.
I mean, on one hand, how could it? But on the other, there's no way the game's gonna be anything like this trailer. It
like,
can't be.
You really expected it to be a game about like human drama and loss, and it was just like a generic like character builder and like loot generator.
Yeah. By the way, this is going way back to an earlier podcast, but somebody had asked us like, what moments in movies or books or whatever have made you cry. I forgot if I mentioned it, but Dead Island trailer, absolutely. That is like hands down greatest trailer I've ever seen. And again, too bad that the game didn't even come close to. The game's fine, but like living up to that, no way, you can't.
I can tell you what moment in podcasting made me almost cry, and that was when I found out that Lotus Prince finished Binding of Isaac.
The end of an era. Single tear.
Just like Charles Barkley showed up in Jam Gaiden. One tear.
Tell me about the lines, Barkley. What do the lines and the balls do?
A symphony of whistles and beats.
So good. Oh, the hype is real.
All right, so that's a good question. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. This one, I think we might have time for one more. This is from Fakafon. Do you guys have any favorite art styles in games, cartoons, comics, what have you? For me, this is a tough one. I don't know if I could say, oh, this art style is the best, because I feel that a lot of times, like music, art styles complement the game that they're with. Like, I don't want a sprite art Uncharted, you know, like that kind of thing. I feel that the cell shading for Killer 7 was freaking brilliant, but for Uncharted, I want a more realistic depiction of characters.
Yeah, I would say, like, for me, I like cell shading. Like, I really like Borderlands and Rogue Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
I like those art styles, but in terms of art in games and cartoons, it's usually artists that I like more than art styles. So in Transformers, I think the artist that I enjoy the most, just because I prefer his depictions of the bots, is Alex Milne, I think his name is. I really like it. It's more of an anime style, but it's because one of the other artists is very much more too human looking, and his are very much robots and anime looking, and it's really nice. In terms of games, one art style, I'm going to say that the Sojima, whatever his name, I really feel bad that I don't know his name, but the artist for Persona 3, 4, and 5, I love his art style. And I really like what he did with the Personas, too, because all of I am blanking on the original artists for the Mega 10 games, too. I think it's Kazuma Kaneko. He had really good art, but the new guy really took his art style and did some great things with it, and took that idea and made it, I would say, more modern, maybe I'm just saying more anime looking, which is great. And then there's this other artist that I'm really starting to enjoy. I've mentioned this game before. It's called Ashes: Rise of the Phoenixborn. It's like a collectible card game, or a living card game, and the artist of that the art of that game is beautiful. And I kind of bought it because the box art looked amazing, and it just happened to be that it was a good game underneath it all too.
All right, so for my answer, I guess in terms of like video game art styles, I really like sort of high definition sprite based games. So like anything that looks like it came from beyond the Super Nintendo era, I tend to like quite a lot. I remember actually getting really frustrated with Shovel Knight because I felt like that was a game that could have had a really nice art style, and they intentionally sort of downgraded it to look like an 8-bit NES game. I remember complaining about this probably more than the game deserved because it was a great game, like wishing it looked better than it did. Like, I remember the comment being like, hey, look, our game fits on an NES cartridge. Isn't that impressive? And I was like, you know what else fits on an NES cartridge? Like, every NES game that's ever been made. Otherwise, in terms of, like, actual artists, I know it's been taking more heat lately, but I remember talking about how I like to watch Steven Universe. That's a more recent thing I really like. I like their art style. In cartooning, I also like John Krafalski. He's the guy who did Ren and Stimpy.
Okay.
He's a student of like old school like Tex Avery cartoons, old Looney Tune cartoons from like the golden age of animation. Like in a day when like everybody's moving towards sort of the anime style where everybody has the same face or like a variant thereof. or there's only a very small number of like character designs. Like his character designs stand out like quite a lot, and it's notable that this is that like he's notorious for being a stickler for his art, which usually means that he's like way past deadlines for like every project he's ever worked on in his entire life, and is incredibly frustrating to work with. But those are the kinds of artists that tend to produce the best content.
Well, yeah, like Miura, the guy who does Berserk. Like, every single time he delays his chapters by like 4 months, you're like, God damn it! And then when the chapter comes out, even the small panels have like too much detail put into them. Like, they're gorgeous.
So, like, another good one would be, like, Trigger Studios, anything they've put out, like Kill la Kill or Little Witch Academia. They have fantastic art. What I would say is that, it costs a lot of money to produce an episode of an animated series, and they try to make the most of it, it seems. Like, anime that tries to conserve their budget, they'll use a lot of still scenes so that you can fill up time without using a lot of frames of animation. But like Trigger, they'll do that, but they'll add a little bit of animation to it, or they'll like vibrate 3 frames, so it doesn't cost them a lot to make it.
Or they'll just have a still pick people like what is it? What's that? The one with the cop, the skeleton cop.
Oh, Inferno Cop.
Inferno Cop. Well, that probably didn't cost a lot of money to make. I hate to inform you.
Yeah, that whole thing was basically a joke.
I still really want to take the karaoke version of their theme song and give it to Duet, like the local karaoke bar that we usually hang out at.
The Inferno Cop song?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's like my the top of my karaoke bucket list.
By the way, quick shout out to the listeners. It should still be on YouTube from the official studio. Watch Inferno Cop. It's like 6 episodes, and each episode is like 5 minutes long. It's the best thing.
Well, it's like 13 episodes, but
was it really?
But every single episode of that show is worth it, I think.
Well, the episodes themselves are like 5 minutes long, at least.
Yeah, exactly. You get what you pay for.
They are hilarious.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So another good question.
Yeah. Well, I don't know where to go from here. All right. So yeah, I believe that is.
Why don't you go home?
Too late.
Ooh, burn.
Too late. I'm gonna go back to that one day you had every day for me. So time for clunkiest delivery ever. So that should be all the time we have. That is the show for this week. So we want to thank all of our fans who contributed questions. Please keep us supplied with awesome topics by submitting questions of your own on the YouTube and SoundCloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs up, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps us promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement keeps the show going. You could also catch us on Thursdays on our sister podcast, Corrective Consciousness, the in-depth look at this week in pop culture. Finally, you could find me as Lotus Prince on YouTube, or at Lotus Prince, all one word, on Twitter. I remember Vice said something about how it was, curious that we advertised him the last time he was absent. So you know what? Don't bother looking for him at Vice the Bold on Steam, PSN, Xbox Live, and Twitter. There's no way you're going to find him there.
Don't send him any friend requests. Don't talk to him. Don't send any messages. He doesn't want to talk to you this week.
He actually explicitly told us to tell all of you to not contact him.
Whatever you do.
I believe it was an ASCII drawing of a middle finger. In the
Wow, what a jerk.
So you can find me as PyroJackFrost, where I want to be found.
And you can find me as OldManStompy at the same location. Not where you can find Pyro, but where I'd want to be found. And even some places where I don't, but, give it your best shot anyway.
Give it your best shot. So, once again, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time. Until next time, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.